Hi, everyone. Hope you're having a good day, and thanks for everyone who's joining in. If you'll give us 2 minutes or so, we'll get started. But thanks for all of you who are joining in. Today, we're going to have Rob Jackson from RLB Digital, and I think many of you would have heard of Rob. He's done a lot of amazing work when it comes to information management, and I would say he's one of the people who's really been driving this effort to and advocating for transitioning to databases as a way of communicating and producing information requirements and as a way of connecting the dots in information management. So I'm really, really looking forward to having him share his insights with us today. If you'll give us 2 minutes, we'll then get started. Thanks for joining. Okay. Amazing. So thanks everyone who's joined us so far. Really excited about today's session. As many of you know, we've been running these community sessions on a monthly basis, and really the goal here is this is not a marketing session, so to speak. It's really about community members coming together and sharing learnings with each other. Sometimes we'll have people who aren't using Mortal in these sessions, but really the target is people who want to learn more about this approach and about these types of solutions and how they can be used and how they can be implemented and how they can be utilized within projects for various processes. And as I said, we're really excited today about having Rob from RLB Digital, who's going to be sharing with us a lot about how they've been using databases as a hub to streamline and connect requirement specifications with planning and actual tracking and assurance, and his vision for bringing it all together. Now, what I'll do is I'll just give you a quick overview of what we do as Morta as a quick reminder. I like doing this for various reasons. First, sometimes there are some of you who may not have come across Morta before, but even for our community members, I think it's important to keep you up to date with how we're positioning the platform and how we relay what we do and how we communicate what we do, because that then helps you on a day-to-day basis when you're describing the platform to your colleagues or to your clients or to your supply chain members and so on and so forth. So really our goal as a company is to empower construction professionals to increase productivity by replacing spreadsheets and documents with connected information hubs. And the way we see it is today, projects rely on hundreds of disconnected solutions for planning, tracking, and communicating critical day-to-day operations. What will often happen is we'll have a database and multiple databases. That could be your CDEs, that could be things like Revit, that could be the ERP, that could be a waste management solution, that could be the accounting solution. And regardless of who I am, whether I'm a design manager, whether I'm a BIM manager, a sustainability manager, a commercial manager, a quality assurance and control manager, or coordinator, I will go into one of these systems and I will pull data out of these systems, and I will then update an Excel-based tracker with this information. The same could be said of Word documents. So there are many things like design reports or O&M manuals and the likes thereof that will require a lot of this information. But also sometimes some of the requirements and the rules effectively are created within the Word documents or within these Excel files, and people then have to go into these to understand what these are, and those ultimately have to connect with what's being tracked. What that means is this information is disconnected, it's often inconsistent, and it's really difficult to maintain the consistency of the information. And as a result of that, that causes a few challenges and introduces risks to projects. But most of all, it decreases productivity and it affects productivity, generally speaking. Now, what we do is we provide hubs that connect information, point solutions, and construction teams together. So we have, rather than having disparate Word documents and Excel files, we move into a dynamic hub. Effectively, think of it as something that looks and feels in some ways like a website. It's a digital online resource. I can go in and I can see the different types of documents and trackers that I would have. And we bring together what would have been unstructured information with structured information. And we then make it easy for the different teams to come in and see the information that's relevant to them. So if I'm a specific contractor or if I'm a specific party, I can go in and I can see the information that's relevant to me. But what we also do is we make it easy for the data to then connect with each other. And rather than people having to access many different systems, a lot of this data then lands in Marta. So whether it's metadata around my documents and what's been delivered, for example, or whether it's things like RFIs that have been issued, this data can then be brought into the system and we can see effectively all of this information from a connected hub. Now, to break it down a bit further, really what we do is we bring together the familiarity and flexibility of spreadsheets with the power of a database. So what does that mean in practice? First, it means that unlike other solutions that are typically focused on construction, we enable you to build the tables that you need in the way that you think is right. So if you wanted to add columns like container ID, descriptions, team, classification, due date, and status, you can add these. If you wanted to add extra columns, you can do that as well. But then the second thing is you can then define data types for each of these columns. So for example, for status, I would have something like a drop-down list. For due date, I would have something like a date column type. And for container ID, I would have a calculated field effectively, where I would be deriving it from other values, for instance. And because that's happening, that then makes sure that the quality of the data is higher. And then there are views that can be created for the different supply chain members to access the data that's relevant to them. The second aspect is you can then easily reuse data and automate tracking with one-click integrations. So you may have data that exists in other systems. That could be the likes of Revisto, for example, where you'll have the issues. That could be things like the CDEs, where you'll have all of the documents that have been uploaded. And we want to make it as easy as possible for the average professional to come in and pull this data out of these systems and then reuse it in various contexts. And then we make it very easy for you to get started using ready-to-use best practice templates that get started very quickly with ready-to-use best practice templates for you to get it started. Now, there are various teams that are using the platform across the supply chain. And what we're doing is we're bringing a lot of our community members to share insights. So in the next one, we're going to have Jamili, who's an associate director in MACE, who's going to be sharing her insights on how client representatives are using Morta to streamline and take control of the design review process. And today we're going to have Rob, who's going to be speaking about database-driven information management. And we're really, really excited for this session as he's going to be sharing a lot of his insights with us. But we're having a few technical issues. So if you can give me 2 minutes, I'll be right back with you in order to get Rob online. But if you just give me 2 minutes, please, and we'll be right back. Sure. If you can bear with us, we're just having a problem when it comes to sharing screens. So we're trying to get that sorted. And then the presentation is a relatively chunky presentation, so he's trying to share it with me right now, I think. Yeah. Okay, I'll just be back in 1 minute. Sorry about this. I appreciate your patience if you just give us a few minutes. Okay, I'm just waiting. Rob is trying to get online. Effectively, the issue is we're having we had tested everything, but there's something with the sharing screen going on due to IT controls that has happened. So we're trying to sort that out. I can see you just. I'm gonna add Rob to the stage. Hi, Rob.
Hi, Mo.
How's it going?
I'm almost there. I'm just waiting for my hard drive to catch up, and then I should be able to present off my other laptop. Hopefully that will work.
Okay, awesome. What I'll do is I'll thanks a lot for joining us and appreciate the joys of these things sometimes and when they're happening live, so I appreciate you trying to sort it out. What I'll do is over the night I'll take 2 minutes to give a few updates that have been happening in the product and give you some time to get the screen up and running, and then we'll take it from there.
Cool.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Okay. Great. So apologies for this, everyone. What I will do, though, is there have been a few updates that have been happening on a product level that I think will be interesting for all of you. I'm just going to for some reason, my computer is also being super slow. It's just clearly not our best technical day. But I just like to share a few of these things with you. So first, one of the things that we've been doing is we've been working on our templates and fine-tuning our approach to templates. And what you can see here is if you now go to your templates, you'll see that there are various things that have been added. So there are some audit reports that have been created. We've done that for A-Site, ACC, AConnex, SharePoint, Viewpoint. And the idea really here is if you go into these, you'll have some of the key checks that you'll need, like file name checks, description checks, the structure of the file name, and then some of the metadata effectively that's associated with the file name. So that's things like the project code, the originator code, the functional breakdown, and the likes thereof. And you can see that here. We're making it very easy for you to start loading these into your projects as you need, as and when you need. What we've also done is we've started adding things like BIM execution plans, exchange information requirements, information delivery plans, and risk registers. We're going to be adding more and more of these over time, but the idea really is we're modularizing the templates and we're just making them very easy for you to load. One of the things that we're also bearing in mind in our approach to making these templates is the fact that you will want to do this in stages. So one of the things we've actually seen over the last few months is that the implementations should be gradual in nature. I think one of the things we weren't good at initially is guiding that. So now we're we're really encouraging people to focus on things like auditing CDE data, for example, first. Once you've done that, you can then go into adding your EIRs. Then following that, you can go into doing things like adding your information delivery plans. And then from there, you can then go into many other use cases as well. But it's important to get to grips with the platform and really get to understand these things step by step. And so that templates has been one of the key areas where we've been doing a lot of work. The second thing is we've released a Power Automate connector as of late that you can start using. It's live on the Microsoft environment, and if you search for Power Automate within Power Automate, you will be able to find that connector, and you will be able to see that. I'm just going to check in with Rob for a second to see if he's managed.
Yeah, I think we're good to go.
Awesome.
Fingers crossed, but yeah, hopefully.
Okay, perfect. Do you mind sharing screen?
Yeah.
Sorry, everyone. I had to do some improvisation here. But yeah, just key updates from our end, where templates and Power Automate, I'm going to be talking a lot more at length about these over time. But yeah, I think it's you're all here to hear from Rob. So, and finally we're online. I appreciate your patience. I hope you've managed to stay on. If not, also the recording will be on. If Rob has time, we'll run the presentation on its course, and the recording will be there for you to then watch it later. And yeah, I appreciate everyone's patience with us today. And Rob, thanks a lot for taking the time to be with us today and for sharing your insights. I think everyone knows I always say you're one of the people that I've personally learned a lot from, and we as a company learn a lot from when it comes to how to think about the role that these solutions have. So really looking forward to having you share your insights with everyone today.
Thanks, Mo. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we're good to go.
Excellent.
We are good to go.
Apologies, everyone. The joys of IT and probably not testing it far enough advanced. Chrome did not want to let me share my PowerPoint. So with no further ado, I will crack on. So my presentation is entitled Smarter Information Management Resources. And obviously this is powered by the Mortar platform solution. Just to give you a brief introduction to RLB, Ryder Levitt Bucknell. It is a global organization of over 4,500 employees with over 140 offices globally, 40 countries. It says here 12 UK offices. There's actually a 13th office opened in Newcastle. As a business, as a wide business, we offer services in terms of cost management, project management, building surveying, specialist specification consultancy, health and safety, sustainability consultancy, and obviously digital as well. RLB Digital is actually a separate entity, but it's an RLB company. And we are currently 5 team members, which are the 5 on the right-hand side, but we're supported by the likes of Matt, who is Chief Digital Officer for RLB and a Director for Digital, and Jenny, who's the Digital Business Manager, and there are others in the RLB business who are supporting us. We've actually got 3 new staff starting within the next week or 2 as well. So we're a growing team. We've been around for a year, and I joined in January of this year to help set up the information management and BIM consultancy part of the digital business. As information managers, our kind of, and this is real summary stuff, is we build all of our approach around the UK BIM framework, which of course includes the ISO 19650 suite of standards and a couple of others within there. And we also build all of our approach around open standards, so building smart standards, everything from IFC, COBE, and I'm going to touch on this in this presentation on IDS as well, so Information Delivery Specification. So a large part of our work is going to be built around capital delivery of projects. So this is a summary slide of what's in part 2, ISO 19650. In very much summary terms, you can kind of break that down into these kind of 7 core concepts of specifying information, procuring it, delivering it, including the planning of that delivery, assurance, storage, presentation, and exploitation. And the reason I'm explaining this is that this kind of gives us a structure to how we've set up or how we're setting up our Mortar environment for projects. So we're kind of using these 7 core concepts that were developed by the gig and published. There's some papers on the NEMA website if you want to understand a little bit more. And that gives us our structure for our service as well. So our service is everything from helping clients to specifying information through to procuring and getting the right teams on board, through to delivery, again, assuring information through automated processes and manual where needed, storage of information. So we can either use common data environments provided by clients, we can help them select common data environments, or we can even provide our own as well. And then we do, as a team, a lot of dashboards and applications and analysis of the information. And again, I'll touch on some of that as I go through the presentation. The important thing is that often when developing these resources, you're either a client, appointing party, and thinking about the resources you need to deliver, or you're a lead appointed party and you can think about those kind of resources that you need to deliver. For my sins, I guess, as a consultant, I have to think about both sides of this fence. And in some ways, because I need to do that, I can start to think actually more about how can we join these processes together from a client into the delivery. And I think over time, that is something that needs to happen more to automate a lot more of these processes. So we often think about information management documentation, I'll say currently, historically, whatever you want to think of it, depending on what you're working on, producing those inputs within Word and Excel, kind of the traditional kind of way of approaching it, and obviously getting outputs sent to suppliers and delivery teams in PDF, and if you're lucky, some of the information is structured in a Excel format as well. Of course, and without going into loads and loads of detail on this, there are lots of challenges with using a traditional approach, and particularly when we start to think about connection and automation and being able to do this in a smarter way, we're kind of limited if we use those traditional kind of documents. So really crudely and very simply, this is kind of how we think about information. We think about a requirement. So that's your exchange information requirement, whether you're the client appointing party or whether you're somebody delivering it, a contractor, and a lead appointed party exchange information requirements, through to planning it. And often people are jumping straight to the planning stage without actually having the requirement. So it's about thinking about how do we plan what we actually require, agreeing and checking that and making sure we're all agreed before we then start producing information, and then ultimately delivering it and assuring against the planned information that we're getting exactly what we want. So that's a really simplistic kind of, I guess, the goal of when we talk about information requirements. I've put these slides together really to explain a little bit more in detail of what we're trying to achieve with this. Bear in mind, I joined RLB Digital in January, so it's 4 months, but I did start some of this work just before I joined. So I've been working on some of this process, and we're now looking at projects where we can start to implement this. So a lot of what I'm showing you here is the approach to our template. So just to start, and I guess a lot of people kind of understand this, but starting in documents and files, we're talking about setting out what we want in the first place. We need to connect and inform that from a project information standard. So the project information standard is going to set out a lot of our coding that we're going to use in the exchange information requirements. We can then obviously inform and connect that to a master information delivery plan. And from there, we can obviously then connect into the common data environment. The blue tabs are things we create. So we can create all of these. The common data environment could be our own common data environment or another common data environment. And from there, we have models and we have files, whether they've come from models or not, uploaded to the common data environment. We can obviously start to check or pull that metadata back into the Mortar platform. And from there, we can start to produce either authorization reports if we're a lead appointed party, or an acceptance report if we are a client. And of course, with all of that, we can produce those traditional outputs. And it is important that we have those traditional outputs still that we can provide. In fact, I was on with a client this morning who wants us to produce traditional documents so that they can go through an approval workflow in a common data environment, and obviously we can answer that using the Mortar platform. Now, when we start to think about model data, the process is fairly similar, but our exchange information requirements start to be influenced by data dictionaries, so the Building Smart Data Dictionary being a case in point. We still need the project information standard. Again, data needs to be standardized around that, and the project information standard is a key resource to align to that. The bit I haven't quite sussed out yet and how we do that is how do we connect that into a master information delivery plan. It's sort of partly there, but not fully at the moment, but that's our intention. And again, we want to pull data back from the common data environment to check we're receiving what we want. The interesting bit, and where it starts to vary with models, is that we have this opportunity to provide both a machine readable and a human readable file exchange, which an information delivery specification is. And again, I'll touch on this in a little bit more detail, but we're very much starting with the beginning of this process where we can write a requirement that can be specified and be checked ultimately in an automatic fashion. Again, the process is similar in that we can then push that IDS into native models going forwards. That's the intention that we would want to do. It may be that you can go directly from Mortar to those tools, but it certainly would be uploading and providing that file into a common data environment. The authors can then start producing that information in line with that specification. And we can also bring that IDS, the specification, back into a federated model as well. So we can download the models we've received along with the IDS, and we can start to check that in a federated environment. And equally, once we've done that, we can then produce our federated model, and we can even produce issues using BIM collaboration format, which can be shared back on to the common data environment. And eventually we can pull those models back into, or the data, I should say, back into the Mortar platform to analyze as well. And from there, we can start to produce authorization or acceptance reports, depending on which side of the fence we are. Equally, once we've done that, we can also produce COBie, or the intention is to produce COBie from the IFC data. And again, raising issues using BIM collaboration format is kind of the end goal with where we want to get to with a lot of this process. And eventually that BIM collaboration format can be pushed back into the native models for the authors to fix. And equally with all of this, again, we can produce all of these documentation in a traditional format is kind of how we've been trying to tackle this. So when we start to think of all of this, the only way we're ever going to achieve this, rather than using traditional documents, is to use the database. And so rather than traditional information management documents, we start to think about these as smarter information management resources. And the reason we're using the term resource is because, yes, we've got textual documents like Word, and we've got tabular information like Excel, but we've also got the ability to use forms and videos and things like Power BI as well to do much more than just a traditional document would do. And it was important when we selected a database that it also has an API to talk to other solutions. And equally, we can still create those outputs. In fact, this conversation this morning with a client was very much, well, yes, we will use the database, but we can still produce your traditional outputs if that's how you want to receive them. And that was, again, core to this process. And again, making sure that they can go into appointments as well is another consideration. So from all of this, we selected Mortar as a platform to build our information management approach and process around and documentation. So we're referring to this as our hub, just simply hub powered by Mortar. That's kind of how we're referring it. And we've built this template basically to cover both the pointing party and lead appointed party information requirements as a cloud-based solution. Some early considerations. I wanted to talk through kind of how we've approached this. As a big organization like RLB, we have brand guidelines, quite an extensive document in terms of what you can and can't do. And again, trying to work out what we can apply in the Mortar platform is important to us. It probably doesn't do everything we absolutely need it to if we were kind of following a traditional document. And therefore, there has to be some kind of compromise within this process. But where we can align, we're absolutely trying to align this process to kind of a standardized RLB approach. Equally, when we get into the specifics of things like tables, again, there are standards. In fact, that one of the recent modifications to the Mortar platform was the ability to color the header column. And again, we can start to do that and align it to our standards. This isn't, again, without its challenges to do, but if we build this into a template, we can kind of standardize a lot of this approach to make it consistent and make it look and feel very much like an RLB document in traditional terms, but obviously it's in a platform approach. So this is kind of what it looks like as a front page. I was very keen for the front page to look inviting. I didn't want it full of tables. I think Mo said to me, you could do a lot of this in tables. You could. I wanted this to feel like a website, feel intuitive to people coming into the platform to be able to find their way to what they will see as documents and see as tables within those documents. So, it's very much about getting this look and feel right before we did any of the kind of technical side of things as well. Obviously, the beauty is when you come into the platform, you don't even need to know where you're looking for specifics within the platform. You can start to search it. And again, making sure things are clearly labeled and again, using plain language as well to making people be able to find this is important to us. One of the things we wanted to do with the documents themselves, though, was not originally I would have treated this probably as text, was where we've got resource details, thinking about how this can be embedded in as a table. The orange fields are the ones where there are placeholders in there and the user such as me or others coming into it, needs to change those values. Of course, you can change any values in here, but those are the ones instantly that you need to go and fix before you start anything and start any document you're producing. Equally, when we built the resource history, yes, Mortar has a full history of information being produced in the platform. Has who's read stuff and who's edited it and so on. And we still wanted to treat this like a traditional document where we export it. But the status value column, for example, is coming directly from the project information standard. Equally, my name as an author is coming from the project directory, and the organization is automatically filled in because it knows I'm an author from that organization. So again, using the platform smartly to do fairly simple things, is kind of the starting point. Even all of this is colored up automatically depending on the values you pick and choose. And thinking about traditional documents when we're writing what we can call smarter resources as well is still important to think about. Of course, a lot of what we do can be written in text. And again, we have placeholders in the templates to think about how we're going to replace them. In fact, Mo and I had a conversation about how potentially in the future this might be able to be done even smarter in terms of how we fill this stuff in. Sometimes your client changes the name halfway through the project, or even your project name. So, going forwards, we may make this even smarter. But at the moment, trying to build a template that really is a starting point is important to us. Equally, when we start to think about exchange information requirements, and often people think about model data, we're thinking about documents, we're thinking about, again, having a template. We're not just thinking about the content that goes, the listed content, but even the vertical columns are important to get consistency when we're developing these, and we can develop in a consistent way. Of course, when we come on to data, before I get onto that, we can obviously embed those the tables into documents, which it's essentially embedding Excel into a Word document, which you wouldn't be able to do with the sheer size of these tables, and obviously putting specific views then starts to allow us to think about exchanging information requirements specific to each party. And Mortar really is a platform that will allow us to think about that and how we do that going forwards. One of the things I wanted to talk about was the information delivery specification, because it's something that is very much the first building block to a lot of this process of getting the exchange information requirements correct. I had to look through the specification that's on the Building Smart website, try and understand what columns of data we need to provide. So thinking about the columns and also how we're going to structure this data in the database, what is required, what's optional, took quite a bit of thinking about. And what we're now slowly emerging from that is a standardized table that can produce that information for an exchange information requirement, but crucially can be exported as an information delivery specification. And this is kind of typically what that data can look like. I think it's fair to say, and Mo's been on this journey with me, with working with previous clients, is sometimes you have to build these databases, sometimes they become too complex, and then you have to think about how you rationalize some of these and try and keep improving what you do. So this is a template that will evolve and adapt as we move forwards, but it's very much trying to put in place best practice as much as we can and align to standards wherever we can. And I should say that one of the things obviously we're now in the process of doing is testing that export. A big thank you to Jad, who's been helping work on this IDS export. He's published some videos already, but I am trying to push a little bit harder with Mortar to make sure we can produce a fully compliant IDS export. And my next task is to test this IDS file that Jad's given to me, and hopefully once we've kind of perfected that process, that will go back into the community that others can use as well to replicate this process. That then means that we can export a machine readable, and this turns into a human readable format that can be exchanged with other tools, and we can start to improve the specification at source basically. And from that, once we've tested that and proved that works, our intention is to build an application on top of the data that we've created, but build an application that we can embed back into Mortar. And this is very much a very quick and dirty kind of proof of concept, if you like, of kind of the thing that we would be wanting to develop. The tables are lovely, text is lovely, but actually having searchable, filterable applications, I think, is built on top of Mortar is going to be key to making this stuff more accessible to users. Equally, one of the things I wanted to touch on was, the use of color is important. It helps people visually understand much quicker. Building, this is just an exchange information requirements template that's built into the exchange information requirements. This can be filtered. You can see the required columns. You can tick on what you need. You can create more column or more rows, for more information exchanges, and you can start to set the dates for those information exchanges within the table. But the coloring takes some time to think about and get right. Thinking about colors that are visually clear to the user is also important to think about. Of course, we talked about exchange information requirements linking to the task and master information delivery plan. I think probably a number of presentations before this have talked about the whole idea of doing task information delivery plans within Mortar. Again, color is important to those pick lists and quickly understanding how they're pulled together. But the important thing here is this is directly connected to the exchange information requirements. So rather than just being a designer coming up with a list of everything they're going to produce, there is actually some kind of requirement starting that point. And that's really important to ultimately improve the flow and truly follow ISO 19650. And of course, from there, we can then produce a master information delivery plan. You can filter this however, or filter it and cut and carve it however you want. So this is by a theoretical, because this is just a demo project showing a client reference and how it could be linked to a client reference. But you could filter the MIDP by the Uniclass project management code. That project management code came from the EIR, not from the MIDP. It doesn't require the authors to put any Uniclass codes in this process. That simply comes at source. And equally, if they want to look at it by, and the view name's wrong on here, but view by the FI table, you could do that as well, or any metadata for that matter within the MIDP. So we can start to look at this differently depending on who we are and how we want to see that, and that's really key to kind of setting up again, standardizing these fields and so on. And of course, what we want to be able to do then is connect the MIDP to these various common data environment solutions. And we designed a process at the moment that's a generic process that should work with any of these common data environments. Obviously, they'll vary in terms of the metadata they can produce. We also, though, have our own internal CDE solution, which we've built on top of SharePoint. It's an application built on top of SharePoint to provide a truly compliant ISO 19650 CDE process. And we're finding lots of clients who obviously have SharePoint within their organization and perhaps don't want to buy a full-blown CDE, but do want a CDE process built on top of that. And we'll be looking to build that into projects as the more projects we pick up as we go forwards. The other thing to think about with this process is how you can reuse information. So we've got an exchange information requirement, we've got a master information delivery plan, and we'll have CDE metadata. From that process, we should quite easily be able to pull together the COBE document output. And I've always wanted to get to the point where if a client asks for COBE documents, it's like, yep, that's fine, it's all part and built in, rather than being quite a lot of work, which has potentially been in the past of pulling this together, is that we can start to slowly get towards an automated process where COBE documents is just a byproduct of everything else that we're already doing. And again, this is just a quick proof of concept to kind of show, that the Mortar platform, this is just a view of the MIDP, essentially, is where we want to get to. The other thing I wanted to sort of look at was how we could use the platform to do some of our checking processes on data we receive. I started to look at regular expressions, and I went and did a bit of homework and tried to use the Mortar platform to sort of set that up, and had a go at it and kept getting confused by it. And then I spoke to a colleague and they said, how about you use ChatGPT? Now I went off and started using it, and I thought this is quite interesting way of doing this quite quickly. But to give you an example of this, I asked this one where I could have a regular expression with date and time format that must be ISO 8601 compliant. It gave me this output, and I thought, yeah, that's great. I can see here down the examples lower down on the screenshot that it gives me pretty much what I want. But then I realized it didn't actually give me everything I needed, because I wanted to have the date itself as a valid output of this for the rule. And just by changing it to date and date time format, I suddenly got an extra value that was acceptable. So I would say that things like ChatGPT can be incredibly useful, but you do need to very much ask it the right question, and then you ultimately need to test it through this process. So regular expressions can be extremely useful, but it does kind of require that rigor. The computer can help you generate the smart bit, but you kind of need to go on from there. Talking about sort of joined up processes, this is a really simple one. Project directory form, creating a project directory form. Nothing rocket science in that. Producing a project directory, but again, reusing that project directory to get a Akobe output, is something that you can think about in terms of process, and being able to reuse information is kind of core to what we're trying to achieve with this. Equally, one of the things that we can do as an organization is we can build solutions within Power BI. So we have a Power BI dashboard here as an example Power BI dashboard running live within the Mortar platform. And we can build any of these kind of dashboards that we need. The beauty of this is the client never needs to leave the platform. They can use these interactively as they need to. Another thing we wanted to consider was how do we integrate our training videos. So we started building training videos around our common data environment. And again, this is where we start to move away from documents into resources. And again, we'll be building a full library of these kind of ones for our own, but we could embed other videos as we need. The other thing we wanted to do was look at how we can embed our CDE application directly within Mortar. So again, this is just running live within, it's a video of it running live within Mortar. So this is one of the applications or one of the early versions of a training sort of area that we've built, and we've got RFIs and TQs within there. It may be we move some of this to Mortar and vice versa, we move some of it the other way. But the beauty of having these connections is it allows us to run different solutions that are talking to each other as we move forwards. And of course, here's another example where we have the master information delivery plan embedded within a document, but we can also have the Power BI dashboard. And again, this is a very early delivered one built off the SharePoint, but it allows us to connect this information smartly within the platform. And of course, getting traditional outputs is also really important to us. And that's something that we need to look at more going forwards, but this is pretty much out of the box. Getting the template out of the box was something we wanted to think about as we go forwards. Now, what we've done is we've built a template, and that allows us to duplicate this for particular projects. So here's one project. We can build this for as many projects as we need, but we also have the opportunity to build a client or a program template and then duplicate that for projects, which is a smarter way of doing this. So although we've built a master template, we'll be using this as we need to tailor it. If it was for a specific sector or a specific client, we can use that template accordingly. And with all of this, what we've tried to do is build a platform where we can specify requirements, we can plan the delivery. That delivery then will happen in a CDE, be ours or somebody else's. We can actually do the planning in the CDE, but we'll probably move all of that into Mortar as we go forwards. And we also have a field application which allows us to collect field data, and we also have what RLB refers to as Focus, which is really the Power BI, the assurance, presentation, and exploitation. And with all of this, they've all got APIs. They will all allow us to connect and improve this process so that we can create an ecosystem of tools and solutions that provide us a very much a connected process towards improving our approach to information management. So I kind of just wanted to do the last bit. Mo asked me to touch on how sort of we go about building a database, I guess, and some tips. One of the things we wanted to think about early was that categorization, which I mentioned, of the 7 categories of specify, procure, deliver, assure, store, present, and exploit. But we also needed to top and tailor that with our homepage. And also we have a bunch of appendices. These don't actually appear in the menu. These are just kind of conceptually the high level. But then we wanted to think about the grouping of those, the categorizations, which is the left-hand menu. So we kind of went down a level. Then we started to think about the tables that we need within each of those sections. So it starts to build out the tables. You can see there's 291 tables, and then building out all of the table views that go with that as well. So again, that started to extend. Well, we got 430 table views, and then thinking about even the fields within those tables. And that was very much kind of, this was like documenting what we'd done, but it was actually really useful. And a really important thing was to consider how much we can standardize the column names within the platform as well, and built around standards. So you can see here quite a good chunk of these, the ones on the screenshot, are not just made up column names. They've actually come from somewhere, and then we're trying to standardize those as much as possible. I think I managed to get out of the whole database, so there's just over 1,000 column names. I think about 2/3 are standardized from some standard that we've managed to align them to wherever possible. And obviously we could get the last bit, that would be great as well. But we're not trying to, we're very much trying to align wherever we possibly can so that we can think about this. And also it's really helped me kind of rationalize and think about the database where columns have been called something slightly different. It allowed me to think about actually these columns are the same information. So with all of this process of building and thinking about this database, we ended up with 53 folders on the left-hand side, which ends up 58 documents and a whole bunch of document sections, 291 tables, some of which are spreadsheets, some of which are forms, and as I said, over 1,000 columns. This is just the template. Already starting to put this onto projects, you will end up taking columns away and adding new ones and so on. But it's a lot of investment in time to build this process. And kind of just to go back to kind of traditional documents, and I could have picked anyone, so apologies to the author of this document, but we often use Excel in a way that's like a pretty picture, and it looks lovely, and it might have some filters on it, and yes, you can use it slightly, but it's actually not designed for a database. And in order to use this, because we've got lots of merged cells and because of the way the data is structured, we really need to think about, even if we're doing stuff in Excel, how we're going to structure it and reuse it in a database. So even if you've not bought Mortar or invested in Mortar yet, even thinking about this, you can do this before you get to Mortar. So thinking about tabular information, rows and columns, without merged cells, without pretty pictures, without logos, without tables and keys, on the side, it's really important to think about. And what you can obviously do with that is then you can turn it into structured information where the cells are not really merged. They are merged automatically rather than merged by literally butchering it kind of thing. And you get this kind of nicer structured output that you can start to reuse that information with. And this is a piece of work that I'm working on at the moment to document the IFC 2x3 schema. The intention is to publish this as a document on the Building Smart UK and Ireland website. This was taking information directly out the Building Smart website, mostly manually. But the beauty of this is I've been able to bring this into the Mortar platform. But this kind of shows that you need these consistent header names across tables when you start to think about how this information is going to be reused. You need a primary key. Mortar doesn't really particularly rely on a primary key. It's not as critical as some databases, but the primary key is important when you want to start linking columns together. So having a primary key, even if Mortar's not as sensitive to that process because you can connect to anything, thinking about which column is going to be your primary linkage to information is actually really helpful when you start implementing Mortar. No merged cells. I think I've probably done that one to death. No blank cells. I absolutely hate blank cells. So I would always put something in there. Otherwise, it kind of looks like you've not put something in there yet. I always think about making sure there is data in all my rows and columns. And also consideration for how you're going to merge this into a database. So it might mean creating some more columns if you were using Excel to do this process, and thinking ahead a little bit how you're going to filter and merge. And some of this document has thought about that, where I want to bring attributes, properties and quantities together. And yeah, kind of my bit of a brutal message I'm probably preaching to the converted on this event is stop using Excel as a pretty picture, really. And what that allows you then to do is, and this is the same set of Excel document I've just shown you, more as a kind of database structure, is thinking about that Excel document right from the beginning when I started it, was to think about how this could then be reused in a Mortar solution. And a lot of this is ultimately driving our IDS process. So it was a really worthwhile exercise to think about that, but you can kind of take this principle and apply it to anything, really. And what that's ended up with is data imported directly into the Mortar platform. So Mo just asked me to put these implementation tips into the presentation. I think it's really important that you invest time in templates, a default approach, an example configuration, whatever you want to call it. It's really important to build those templates specific to what you need to do, and at least make a start on that process. But what I would say is you've got to then constantly iterate through this process. So you don't just write a template, go there, it's done, and walk away from it. you have to accept that at times you'll have to pull it apart, you may have to rebuild it, and you may have to invest more time in it to make it better. So it will never be finished, really. I think these templates, are constantly evolving. Obviously, standards are evolving as well. So we need to constantly keep an eye on that, and it requires, people time, person time, and investment in, from a kind of acceptance that you've got to have spend some time to do that process. I will always say my big one has always been thinking about the user experience. So it's not always like what can be automated or making it look smart. Think about what that interface is going to look like for anybody who comes into the platform who's not familiar with Mortar, making it as user-friendly as possible, whether that's a bit of color, whether it's putting some images in. And I don't mean just putting images in for the sake of it, but just helping illustrate the point to people, I think is really important to getting buy-in. Don't worry about automation at start. Some of my things are not completely automated. I think over time, more things can be automated, but it's more a case of taking those traditional and then starting to think about how you can connect it, improve it. And I think our IDS is a good example of that in terms of how we've approached things. Think about the structure. So think about the structure of your database. You're going to build a big database, but think about how you could expand it in the future. So how do I drop new things into it if I need to? Where would they live, and how flexible is it to do that? Tables, I mentioned before, thinking about primary keys for information, I think is really important, because it's going to help you when you start connecting these things together and trying to apply that automation. And then test it, break it, test it again, keep breaking it, keep testing it, and try and take feedback from people as well. Ultimately, they're the ones who can improve your processes as well. But it is really important to kind of try and see if you can break this process by somebody, putting in some stupid value, and thinking about whether you can have a standardized list and so on. And obviously, as Mo well knows, I feed lots of stuff back to Mortar in terms of how I think we can improve things as well. A couple of slides just to finish. My presentation is very focused on information management and BIM, but RLB Digital do far more than just information management and BIM. And part of that, the solutions and applications developed, I kind of touched on, but we can help in other areas of digital as well. And if you want to learn more about RLB Digital and information management, our page on the website has recently been updated and kind of talks in principles about what I've touched on today. And equally, if you want to follow us on LinkedIn, we have our own showcase page as well. So that's it from me. I don't know whether anyone's got any questions, Mo?
Thanks a lot for that, Rob. We managed. We managed to get there at the end, and honestly, I really really appreciate it, especially that last slide. To be honest, the slide that you actually made about tips for people on Excel, merge cells, blank cells. Like all of these types of things are things that we're actually talking about a lot as well. And I really like the way that you put it, because people do use it in some ways as it's almost as if they're painting something on Excel sometimes rather than, So I really, really like that and appreciated that. And so thanks a lot for sharing all of that with us. I'm just going to check what questions we've had so far. There was one question that I thought was interesting that I'm already aware of from Andrew Waring, who asked, when it comes to CDE metadata, right now you have to add things like classifications and so on and so forth into the CDE. Do you think that Morta or like the database approach decreases the need for that happening at that point in time? Like how do you see the relationship between metadata put in the IDP or in the requirements and the metadata that has to go into the CDE?
So I think with all of that metadata, you want to put it at the highest level you possibly can, right? So if you've got a floor plan, you don't want to go and put a uniclass code for a floor plan against every single floor plan. You want to put it against floor plans. And you do that by doing that in the exchange information requirement, because you've got a requirement for floor plans in the first place. So that piece of information can be cascaded down into the TIDP, MIDP, whichever you want to call it, and that data could then be pushed into the CDE process without the user even having, the supply chain even having to add that uniclass code. It was only effectively then comes back to, I'll say, the client. The client could also be, of course, the lead appointed party, which is the contractor. There's going to be some metadata in the CDE. Revisions is a good example, although some CDEs obviously do uprev automatically, but then when you go from PO1 to CO1, you've still got to start again. And you will want to pull some of that metadata back. But yeah, I think creating your MIDP, which is essentially the files you want to create, but without the revision and the data was uploaded, you've got most of that in Mortar. That said, I think, and one of the things I was considering in my MIDP process was doing comments back on the documents. You could do that in Mortar because all you need is a field that says review comments and the date you've put the comments against it. So yes, you could do less in the CDE in terms of manual user configuration of pick lists and do it more in a structured way. Or equally, if it's in the CDE, you could pull it back, from the CDE if it's already there. So yeah, I think it works both ways. There's that debate: do you push placeholders into the CDE that people then just upload files to, or do you let them create the file and check it against? I think any of those workflows can be valid. But I would come back to the point of, if you can put it in once or put it in less times, then that's probably the right solution.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for sharing that. Well, thanks a lot, Rob. We've managed to overrun by just a few minutes, so I think we'll let it stop here for today. But as always, really, really appreciate your insights. Thanks for taking the time. I think there is a lot to learn from what you shared, and you've been on this journey for a number of years. So I hope that people learn from what you shared, because when it comes to the implementation, I think that slide with the tips, not focusing on automating, testing, iterating, breaking things and pulling them apart, thinking about how to structure the data. I think they're just very important when using Morta or using any of these types of solutions. So thanks a lot for putting this together, and thanks for sharing your insights with us today.
And thanks for inviting me, and apologies for the slightly technical chaos at the beginning.
No worries. It's a lesson, because we had tested everything. We somehow missed the sharing screen bit. But next time we'll make sure to do a better job of that on our end as well.
No worries.
Thanks a lot, Rob. Have a good one.
All right. Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining us today. Hope you found it useful. As we mentioned, the next one is going to be with Jamile from Mace, and we look forward to having you there for you to see how she's been utilizing the platform. Actually, she'll be touching on a lot of the design review process and the comments that Rob had actually just mentioned, because that's one of the things that they've mainly been doing. They've been letting contractors use their testing, currently getting the contractors to use their own CDE, but getting clients to do the design review process in Morta, which enables them to keep audit trails and so on and so forth of what happens. So it's a very innovative and different way of using and leveraging our integrations to solve one of the big problems, I would say, in the space. So I'm really looking forward to that one. And yeah, hope you're finding them useful. Any feedback, please let us know as always, and appreciate your patience at the beginning of the session. And we do apologize for the technical issues. Have a really good day.
Bye.
I'm